Pam and I's life when we were first married, we didn't have any money. Like, we didn't have money. Like, paycheck to paycheck. We were the youth leaders. We lived right across from the church. I think we were good at it because we could relate to the kids. And we wanted to go to this youth specialties youth conference in Chicago because we thought, like, this will help equip us more because we don't know stuff. Went to the church board and put a request in because we didn't have any money to pay for this.
Uh-huh.
And the church board said, finances are tight. I'm sorry. Just make do without it. And our hearts were broke. And then somebody anonymously put money in there with a note like, we want to encourage you to go to the youth conference.
It's just like if you serve somebody, if you go and serve a widow, an orphan, whatever, you will feel joy. I'm mentoring these young men. I'm like, they're always so depressed, and they come in, they're in their head. I'm like, you are in a movie where you're the only star, you're the only actor. I'm like, to get out of that movie, you got to serve other people well. It's very similar with our resources. Like, it has been amazing to me, Chris. It's almost like the second I figured out what God was talking about, that you are just a conduit for him.
Yes.
Most of us get 80, 90 years here. What do you want to do with it?
Yes.
What do you want that money, if that's the thing that we're talking about in this culture, because it's not always money. Generosity isn't always money. But if that's the thing, if that's the golden calf or whatever, how's that working for us? Like, we're living in debt. If you trust him, I have been amazed at how much joy I found in that. I'll give you an example. Like, if I take a meal to a family and I bring my boys, my boys just saw
the impact,
the hands and feet of Christ, right? Now, my boys seeing that, I am definitely blessed by that because my heart is to grow these children to be little Christ followers. So that's blessing.
Yes.
Nobody deposited into my 401k,
Yep.
but what would I even spend that on anyway?
Yes.
So it's like, it's this ecosystem. It's this God economy that I've become almost like infatuated with it. It's like so expansive and so beautiful. And I was living so small before that.
I didn't grow up with examples of tithing, of generosity to others. And again, it wasn't that my parents weren't generous. That just wasn't part of who they were. They grew up very limited in resources, and they worked their way to middle class, and they succeeded with that. But they weren't believers until their end of their life. But I didn't have the demonstration. So so when I got married, this tithing thing's new to me. So we got married, and that was 1990.
Are you saved when you get married?
Yeah, I was saved in '88.
Before you met Pam?
Yeah, no, after I met Pam, I got saved. Palmyra Brethren Christ / Encounter is the only church I've ever come to my whole believer life.
And you've met Jesus there.
So I met Jesus here. Yeah. So when I first came to this church, I had an earring and I had a ponytail. Percentage of ladies had head coverings, and everybody wore a suit and a sport coat and a tie in the late 80s. That was a different time. This church was accepting of people. They've always been that way. And I think that's part of it. But when we got married, Pam, grew up in a Christian family, and the values of tithing, of your 10%. And Pam does the checkbook, and tithing was always critical to us, no matter how much money we had in our bank account. There were times that, like you just talk about, like, is it the electric bill? Do we pay the rent? Like, tithing has always been there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always joyful, though, too. So I don't want to sound like rainbows and butterflies.
No,
And I just had this overwhelming sense of God's peace and tithing. There was times, earlier, like, oh man, do we really need to tithe? Like, God, we have other needs.
Yeah.
But we stuck with it. But God always did provide. When others bless us with things, we are impacted.
Yes.
When
Is that
others
not
bless
true?
us, and we're very independent. Like, you know what? I got this. You don't need to carry that bag of groceries to the car for me. I got it. No, I can move that furniture by myself. I got it. Like, a lot of us are very independent. We don't want help. We kind of look at help as a weakness, but God doesn't look at when he brings things in our lives as a weakness.
No.
He looks at,
That's such a good point.
what you need this. Like, God knows what we need, and he'll bring things into our lives even when sometimes we ask for it, but a lot of times we're not asking for something in our life, and God will bring a joy, a gift, something into our life that blesses us, And
You're right, and sometimes we don't have any room for it. I like what you're saying
Yes.
there. Like it's our pride or ego or
Yes.
whatever, but there is for other brothers and sisters to bless us. That's how.
But I also think he doesn't want us to have the attitude that, oh, God's going to bless us. I don't need to worry about that. I'm going to act irresponsible because God will bring something in to cover me. Like, that's not the attitude to have either.
I
You need to
agree.
have this humble heart that you are obedient to his calling and you're not expecting this, but when it comes, you're blown away. So
Yeah.
in the late 80s, Pam and I were the youth directors here at Palmyra Brethren in Christ Church. There was lots of kids from the neighborhood, and we had basketball. I played a lot of basketball, believe it or not. I don't look like it now, but we had basketball in the church parking lot right next to the parsonage was there, and we didn't have kids at that point because we waited 6 years before we had children. We intentionally waited to have children because we felt God wanted to do other things in our lives.
Yeah.
But when we were the youth leaders, we felt good that we can relate with kids and we can lead them to Christ and talk about godly lives, but you still don't feel like you're equipped. So there was this conference, Youth Specialties, I remember this, and it was in Chicago. It was out by O'Hare in Rosemont, Illinois, and it was great. Duffy Robbins, and there was all these amazing people that wrote all the books that are the church libraries on youth ministry. We want to go to this. And so I remember we talked to the church board. We probably wrote a letter to the church board saying, hey, can they allot some funds for Pam and I to go there? And I remember the disappointment when the church board, I don't remember who it was, said, you know what, the request was turned down. Just, we don't feel that's the best use of our resources right now from where we're at. And it was like a dagger in the heart. And you're like, I know, we're trying to serve God through the youth of this congregation, this community, that we don't feel like we're fully capable of the resources, and we're going to give our time. We're going to take our vacation from work because we both were working, and it was really disappointing. So you go through disappointments in ministry. Ministry is not always fun and enjoying, right? There's disappointments.
What
But
do you know?
The church wasn't big then, so there was little coopy holes at the entrance of the church that every family had their own mailbox.
That's so intimate.
It was very intimate,
Yes.
and so there was an envelope with a note and money that somebody generously donated.
You still don't know who?
I don't know who it was. That said, you know what? It was God speaking through those people to say, you do need to go to this youth ministry conference. And it was very humbling because we didn't have the money to do it ourselves. And here, why would somebody do this for us? And it was very encouraging. That was like a life episode
That put something in your heart.
that impacted us about what it's like to receive and what it's like to give. And that
Boy, has the Lord
we're
multiplied
not,
that.
we're not always worthy of these things, but God blesses us. And I think that God used that as part of the foundation that he has built in us and our relationship, our marriage.
He did, Chris, because I'm a good friend of yours, and he did something to your heart with that.
It could have been God having the board say no, because maybe if the board said yes, hey, here it is, then I wouldn't have grown in faith. Like, so this door that closed, it allowed me to have my eyes open when somebody else opened a door that really impacted me. Maybe the impact wouldn't have been as strong. So as I get older and you learn through things, I don't wish my life was different.
That is
because
interesting. That
I might
it
not
had
have
to
had
be that way.
If our life, sometimes we wish things didn't happen to us because we wouldn't have gone through those hardships or those catastrophes in our life. And I'm not saying about all things we can't wish away, because I'm sure there's some real serious things that people have gone through that wish it didn't happen. But I think it develops the character of who we are because we went through these things that if
It was the no
Yes.
that made the yes so sweet, that
Yes.
made the obedience so sweet. Yes, I
Yes.
see that. And I like where you're going with this. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it had to be that way.
yes,
You and Pam have seen, from youth group leaders to raising kids in the church to so many seasons, seasons far before me. I have always been blown away by the generosity of the church, the people in this church, which is the church. Let's just framework our terms real quick. It is a beautiful thing to witness. Like, it has happened nonstop in the 10 years I've been here in more ways than I can count. And I bet you've seen even more colors in that rainbow. Like, it's so many things. It's meals, it's time with people, it's follow-up phone calls, investment in your children. It's money.
people growing in faith and allowing God to lead them in the decisions that they make. That doesn't mean that they solely give everything away or serve with give all their resources away, but their faith and the sharing of the gospel through the lives that we live here at this church, people follow through on that. And so we'll go back a step. I believe it's God whispering in the ears and prompting people to do the things that they do, that they feel comfortable with it. Like they're not following, I was talking to Danny earlier, we are talking about the society is like, you grab on as much money as you can because you win.
Yeah.
And because that's what the culture tells us. You go for the job that pays the most, you want this, that's the best. Like
you take down the angles.
But that's not the kingdom's perspective. The kingdom's perspective is about relationships. It's about the joy you have in your heart when somebody else is blessed or you bless somebody else. There's joy in your heart. And blessings isn't always money. Blessing is service. This church has helped a lot of families move. They've packed up moving vans and minivans.
Delivered a lot of meals.
And they do a lot of service. And that is that's the hands and feet of Christ, because people really know who their community is when they're supported, the genuine love. So this goes back to this church. I believe that people really do sense that calling, and that comes in from the teachings from the pulpit. That just comes from the culture of what is valuable here at this church for people.
I've seen that too. Do you agree with me, having seen as long as you have? A group of believers prioritized that long before my time. And like yeast and bread, that saturated the culture of a body of believers. As we've multiplied all the way to 900, I think what has been amazing to see is even as new people on-ramp into the church family, they come into contact with that and become a part of that. And I've seen that multiply. And I've even seen people speak of that in tangible ways. Yeah.
Has to be genuine.
So put some skin on that with your experience. Like, where's that coming from? I'm genuinely trying to circle that. Like, what? What is it?
Like it's not like a sermon series that comes out every March that they're going to do a 5-week session on how you serve and give others. Like, I mean, there's messages that tie into generosity and the fruits of the Spirit and gifts and servanthood. Like, but it's the culture. When there's a need made known, people within this church respond. The congregation responds to a need, but they also have confidence that the need is genuine and that the needs aren't just being known just to play a game. Whether it's the leadership or whoever's proclaiming the need,
the fruit, maybe.
Yeah, they know it's genuine. Like and maybe it's because we're not. I don't know. We're not saying let's raise $100,000 so we can build this gold statue of Pastor Ted. Like, okay, like where's that? Like, okay, seriously, because
that's hilarious.
But my point is, like, we're gonna say, like, where we're at right now, we have a good amount of debt on this building. And I value that the leadership and the body says that we need to be good stewards of our resources, and we spend a lot of money on interest. And this building, this is a gift to this community. It's a gift to us as the body. We're able to impact lives through the facilities that we have now. They're beautiful.
I'm here all the time, and this place is popping.
It is.
I mean, all the time.
And that's what we want. We want the kingdom to be furthered here. But we also have a debt. So it's called Given to Joy. I think there's going to be teaching and stories shared to talk about like what the needs are. So the finances is part of it. The bigger part, and this is before the multi-site conversation was even in the consideration. And Ted shared that in the Q&A that we had the other week, is that we need people to serve. And this is not meant to be a spectator event. You're not meant to come here on a Sunday morning, you sit in the bleachers, you praise and sing some amazing songs, great teaching, you thanks everybody for being here, great weather, we move on next Sunday, I'll see you again, we start this over again. There's a point that you come like, this is my church.
It's a church family.
And maybe you don't feel comfortable teaching the kids or changing diapers because the diaper thing's not me. You might be the parking lot guy. You might be the coffee person. You might be the greeter. There's a point, and every person or family is a little bit different. When I shift that I'm a visitor to that this is my church and like this is my family and this is my family, I'm going to take the trash out this week. I'm going to wash the dishes. I'm going to make supper. I'm going to drive the kids to the soccer game. Like as a family, we all have roles in this, and the Given to Joy is meant to say, okay, we
This
are
is
part
where
of a
we
family.
are.
This is who we are.
Then this is where we are.
And just because things look really good from the outside, and they are, like stability wise, we are good. We are sound. But
Yeah.
there's times that there's some people that are really serving. Maybe every week they're serving, and maybe they'd like to sit with their family one of those Sundays, or they don't want to come for the whole 3 hours. They'd like to come just for an hour and a half. The world teaches you just worry about yourself, but the kingdom teaches us that we're in this as a family. So when Youth Sunday was here, I was so blessed in Youth Sunday.
know.
I came to both services because I knew it was going to be like. I cried in both services of joy.
That is fruit dangling in the
Yes.
wind on this tree.
Yes.
Unbelievable. The world is sometimes can feel like a dumpster fire, right?
Yes.
And you come to that, and there are young people talking like lions for the kingdom,
Yes.
with boldness and assurance and building community for each other. And
I see this with young families.
Yep.
I see this
Yep.
with those in midlife, latter part of life. Like I see the joy on a Sunday. I see community.
take joy. One day in eternity, all this stuff is gone.
Yes.
And people are not gone. And we need to be about the business of people. And I think the secret sauce of an encounter is that we are about the business of
And,
people. I want to personally thank you, because what I've seen you and Pam do is walk through seasons of difficulty with grace, teach silently, which, by the way, is the best way to teach. I'm trying to get better at keeping the yap shut and teach it silently. Teaching silently with your life. I've seen you example marriage and child rearing. I've seen you example stepping up in leadership in a body. You're a real blessing to the church, brother. And please tell your wife, if they're impressed with you,
I know.
I'd
They should-
strongly suggest
I know.
introducing yourself to Pam
They gotta
Pierce.
talk to Pam.
Pam Pierce is...
She's the brains of the marriage.
No, it's so true. Me and you have it in common because we suck all the air out of the room, but the real gold mine quietly behind us, keeping us on the road.
I love Encounter. I love the people. I love what God's doing here. I love that He allows us to be partners of His in ministry.
It's exciting.
It is exciting.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for all this time.